Do you find you have too much to do and not enough time in your business, and you don't know how to prioritize? The 80-20 rule might just be for you. A lot of people talk about the 80-20 rule. You might hear people say, well, it's the 80-20 rule. But not everybody knows what that can mean, and specifically how you can apply it in what you do, both in business and actually in your personal life. What does this mean? Well, what we're really talking about is 20% of something accounts for 80% of something else. So in your business, 20% of your products, 20% of your SKUs accounts for 80% of your revenue. When you think you can focus on 20% of what you do and it's generating 80% of your money, you might have a better idea of where to focus your time. So where else can we apply this? Well, I just mentioned 20% of your products probably account for 80% of your revenue. Your products maybe have different profit margins. If you're able to break that down, you may find that 80% of the margin you make, 80% of the profits you make are coming from 20% of the product or services that you offer. 20% of your customers, maybe you're accounting for 80% of your sales. When you start thinking about the 20% and the 80% in this way, you start realizing you can put your attention in a whole different aspect. You can focus a little more clearly on finding what I talked about in another pro tip, in finding that 100 other customers like that one you just had. So you can start looking at what is it about that 20% that has them buying that 80%. Now, we have referred to this in various aspects in inventory and other places as the ABC analysis or ABC rules. A items, those most important items, are that 20% that takes up 80% of your cost, that 20% that drives 80% of your revenue. Well, that leaves B and C. So let's talk about B and let's talk about C for a minute. You figure if 20% of your products account for 80% of the things you sell, or 80% of your revenue, well, that leaves 80%, right? Well, 30% of your stuff, if you will, accounts for 15%. Wow, think about that for a brief moment. 30% of what you sell only accounts for 15% of the money that you make. How about this one? Those are B items. The C items, 50% of your stuff only accounts for 5%, the remaining 5% of the revenue you bring in. Just imagine, half of what you do, half of the items on your shelves, half of the products you sell are really only generating 5% of your revenue. I hear you right now. You're looking at me and you're going, that can't be right. Well, first off, I'm gonna ask you to do this. Test it out with your own data, but let me give you a story. I worked with a grocery cooperative in Virginia, and we had the same conversation, and we actually had the same, that can't be true. And then he went through the data that he had in his sales spreadsheets. He consolidated the data. He went through and took all the sales for the year, consolidated all the quantities and the dollar amounts and everything by product number, by UPC or SKU. And when he was all done with this, because he had so many items, it came out to 20% accounted for 80% of his sales. And oh, by the way, half of the items only accounted for 5% of his sales. Now, when you think about that, in his case, that meant that of that 50%, of the half the things in that cooperative grocery store, many of them had 0 sales. That's how you get to 5% of your revenue. You have a large number of items that aren't contributing at all. So when we talk about how do you manage, how do you use this information to your benefit? Well, the first one is you focus intently on the 20% that's driving 80% of your revenue. How do you leverage that? How do you make sure you know why those are the things that are driving your sales? And then I would suggest you look at those C items and ask really that bigger question. Why am I carrying items that contribute nothing or a minimal amount to my business? There may be legitimate reasons here. It may be something that you, for the business you have to have on the shelf simply because people expect to see it. Maybe You're a cooperative grocery store chain, and people expect to see certain more environmentally friendly products. They don't necessarily buy them, but they expect to see them. Or maybe you're a photography studio, and people expect to see landscape photographs in addition to the portraits that you do. But they don't actually want landscapes, but it shows that you have a breadth of ability, and that draws them in. Or maybe you run that same Photoshop and you carry odds and ends or specific brands that most people don't purchase, but it shows you have credibility in the industry. There's all sorts of ways you need to look at that C group, that 50% that only drives 5% of your revenue, because maybe you need to carry it, but more often than not, maybe you don't. And you just thought it was something that your customers wanted, and so you got it and you brought it in. Now, if you eliminate some of those items, guess what? The 80-20 rule still applies. Things are going to shift a little bit. So the question becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? What do you do once you created this? Or maybe for you, the question is, how do I even get to that in the first place? Well, first off, you need to have data. My guess is you already have most of the data you need at your fingertips. If you use Excel, literally at your fingertips. So pull all your sales data in, or pull all your inventory data in and see what's turning over, what you're replacing, how much inventory you purchased throughout the year. Now, how would you go about doing that? Well, you are going to have to consolidate that data. You're going to have to crunch it down so you figure out how I know exactly how much of each SKU I've sold. Because every time you sell something, you sell it in quantities of 1 or 2 or 3, but you need to know how many you sold for the whole year. And so you'll go into Excel or go into your spreadsheet of choice, and you'll use maybe what's called a pivot table to consolidate that data, and then you start sorting that information. Now, if this seems like something challenging to you, one of the things you might want to do is reach out to us here at the Covation Center, and we can sit down with you and work with you on your data. Trust me, we're not going to share your data with anybody else, but we want you to understand how you can better manage your business. So what are some of the places you can pull this information if you don't happen to have it in Excel? Point of sale systems. I know a lot of people are using Square and the Square Up system. Well, it tracks a lot of that information for you to include your customers and who your better customers are and what your customers are purchasing. So when you can pull that data out of your point of sale system, you can start using that as a way to look for this. Maybe you use invoicing. You can pull all your invoices. That will give you your customer information, and it will give you your product information as well. Now here's a small little bonus on top of all of this. Where else can this 80-20 rule apply? Well, if you have a large number of employees, 80% of your personnel problems may come from only 20% of your employees. Think about that for a minute. You can probably name them. If I were to talk about the personnel problems you might have in your business, and I said 20% of your employees are causing 80% of your problems, instantly someone's face just popped into mind. There's other things you can look at too. Maybe there's maintenance issues. You have a manufacturing operation. 80% of your problems are 20% of the pieces of equipment that you have. There's all sorts of ways that you can apply this 80-20 rule to the various aspects of your business. And by thinking through this and looking for that 20% that's causing 80% of a good or a bad thing, you now have a better way of focusing your time and your efforts and your resources to grow your business. I'm Steve Brady. I'm the Executive Director here at the Covation Center. I ask that you simply do this one thing. Click subscribe so you can get more videos just like this. Videos that we're doing here at the Covation Center, that I'm doing, that Dave Larson is doing, and other experts through the Covation Center are doing to bring you the best tips you can have on how to grow your business. Have a great day.